Hello everyone, with Jamaica here. Welcome to this updated video on the weather across Jamaica and the Caribbean. It is Tuesday evening, March 21, 2023. Now before we jump into it, please ensure that you guys like the video, share it, subscribe and tap notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I post a brand new video. Feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section letting me know whether there's been like in your area recently. Also feel free to ask any weather related question that you might have about the future of the weather in your specific area. I respond to all comments and I really live for this stuff. Alright, so let's just take a look at the surface map of the Atlantic for this evening. We can still see that we have that high pressure ridge to the north of the main development region that's sending a lot of easterly trade winds across the main development region into the Caribbean. And we can also see that we have that cold front across portions of the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos and Cuba. And it has also induced a trough right there to the west of Jamaica. If we actually take a look at the visible satellite images before the sun went down, we can see those low-level patches of clouds moving from east to west across the main development region into sections of the eastern Caribbean, all courtesy of that easterly flow of winds brought about by that high-pressure ridge. And we can see that line of clouds right there to the north of the Caribbean associated with that cold front, bringing some amount of overcast skies and rainfall across the waters right there to the west of Jamaica, also across sections of Cuba, the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos. We'll be talking more about the weather across the Caribbean later on. Let's focus our attention on the prediction that was made for today's weather yesterday. According to our video yesterday, it was stated that we would have received some amount of rainfall across sections of eastern Jamaica in the early morning hours, and that we would have received some amount of rainfall across sections of central and western Jamaica during the afternoon hours. And what ended up happening? A post was made on our Twitter page at 5:15 a.m. highlighting some amount of clouds coming into sections of eastern Jamaica, bringing some amount of isolated showers to those very spots, St. Thomas and Portland. So that prediction actually came true. What about later on in the afternoon? If we actually take a look, another post was made highlighting some clouds bringing overcast skies and rainfall across those very spots that were predicted to have been receiving rainfall. So central and western Jamaica indeed got some amount of rainfall. So sections of northern St. Catherine, portions of Clarendon, Manchester, St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland and Hanover got in on some amount of overcast skies if not rainfall. And we even had some confirmation from our commenters, Onika McNeil stating yes, showers in Westmoreland, and other commenters stating it was rainy by Fest Genius, and Lamone Rake stating cloudy with a little rain now and then in Portland as usual. If you actually take a look at the visible satellite images before the sun went down, we can see those clouds moving from east to west, especially across southern Jamaica, and we can also see those high level clouds being streaked off to the east. More than likely those are the upper level clouds, those thunder clouds, those cumulonimbus clouds in the upper levels of the atmosphere being sheared off towards the east as usual. And we can always see these clouds being streaked off very well on the infrared satellite images, as we can see by all of those colors, blues, greens and oranges and yellows right there. So we indeed got some thunderclouds across sections of Hanover and Westmoreland during the afternoon hours with some amount of deep convection right there. If you actually take a look at the Doppler radar images at this time, we can see that we still had some leftover rainfall as indicated by those greens and yellows that represent moderate to strong rainfall right there to the south and west of Westmoreland and St. Elizabeth right there that got most of the rainfall for today. If we take a look at the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology website, we can see that it indeed rained across those very spots in the afternoon, Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, and we also got some rainfall right there across portions of Clarendon, Manchester, and northern St. Catherine. We also got some rainfall in the morning as predicted across sections of St. Thomas and Portland, some of which made its way across the coastal areas of some northern parishes as well. Let's take a look at the temperatures for tonight. We can see that we have 26 degrees Celsius in Kingston, 25 degrees Celsius in Montego Bay. But what will the temperatures be like for tomorrow? Both of these maps are showing 1 p.m. on Wednesday. We can see that Jamaica is right there, and we're not expecting any below normal temperatures as represented by the blues and the greens. Neither are we expecting any above normal temperatures as represented by the yellows and oranges or reds on the key. We are right there in the zero range, and that represents average temperatures, and that's the consensus on both the Euro and the GFS. And we know that when we have consensus like this, chances of it actually happening are much higher. And what's the consensus? What's the average temperatures for the month of March? About 87 degrees Fahrenheit. And when we convert that on the thermometer, that's about 30 degrees Celsius. So we should be getting normal temperatures for tomorrow. Taking a look at the dry air map right now, we can still see that Jamaica is embedded in some amount of slight yellows or blues that indicate less dry air and more moist air across our area. The driest air seem to be right there across the open waters of the North Atlantic, but all of those reds and whites right there. As it relates to the Saharan dust forecast, 2 p.m. on Wednesday seems very clear and promising for majority of the Caribbean. Majority of the dust associated with the Sahara Desert is right there across portion of the main development region as well as section of the landmass of Africa. Moving on to the wave forecast for tomorrow, Jamaica is being surrounded by 1.5 meter wave heights or less at this time, as seen by both the Euro and the GFS models for 12 p.m. on Wednesday, and that's due to the fact that we'll be receiving easterly winds averaging up to 10 to 20 knot winds, and that kind of wind strength doesn't necessarily bring high wave height, so the fishers and marine interests should be liking the seas at this time. However, we can see that the winds are coming in from the east as usual, but where does all of that air pile up? We can see it piling up at the same places that we saw today. So Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, maybe inland areas of some central parishes, northern St. Catherine, northern Clarendon, northern or central Manchester right there. And what usually happens when all the air piles up right there with the least amount of winds in blue, as we can see on the key, we usually have all of that cloud cover piling up in the afternoon hours, building afternoon convection. And if these clouds rise up into the upper levels of the atmosphere and become thunder clouds, then more than likely they're going to be sheared off by those upper level winds. And what does the Euro and the GFS say about the upper level winds for tomorrow? They're coming in more from the west, so that will favor more rainfall for inland areas of some central and western parishes, especially those western parishes during the afternoon hours. Let's take a look at the rain forecast for tomorrow. We can see that both the Euro and the GFS are showing some amount of blues that represent rainfall across sections of eastern Jamaica. What time is that? That's 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is actually 12 a.m. Jamaica time. So that's midnight tonight. We see some rainfall across sections of St. Thomas and Portland on both the Euro and the GFS. That's consensus, that's agreement. And we know that when we have it like that, chances of it actually happening are much higher. Skipping ahead to about 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is about 7 a.m. Jamaica time, we can see more blues showing up across sections of northern and eastern Jamaica. So Portland, maybe St. Mary getting in on some of that, as well as St. Thomas right there at 7 a.m. Skipping ahead to about 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is about 2 p.m. Jamaica time, we can see the blues migrating now to across portions of central and western Jamaica, especially the southern areas. We see less of those blues across the northern coastal areas on the Euro. The GFS is showing more of the darker blues right there across portions of those very same spots. Central and western Jamaica with a bias more towards southern parishes. So we can see that there's consensus, there's agreement on both models for rainfall at 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. You know that when we have consensus like this, the chances of it actually happening are much higher. So residents who live in the parishes of Clarendon, Manchester, St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, get ready for more of what you received today. And if you actually take a look at the accumulated precipitation forecast by both the Euro and the GFS, there is consensus with where the rainfall is expected. Although both maps are showing less than an inch of rainfall, we can see the consensus of the rainfall across eastern Jamaica in the morning as what the 1 hour precipitation forecast shows, and then more than likely where we see those yellows in the afternoon is across portions of western and central, well, maybe mostly southern Jamaica during the afternoon hours. Either way, there's rainfall being predicted by both maps, and these maps are showing all the rainfall that's expected from now up until 10 p.m. on Wednesday. And even although majority of this rainfall should be across eastern Jamaica in the morning and then central and western Jamaica during the afternoon hours, we can see that both of these maps agree with what the previous maps are showing about the rainfall. So there's some rainfall definitely in store for the island of Jamaica for tomorrow. And this is actually a blessing, considering that this is one of the driest months of the year. March is one of the driest months, and we average about 87 millimeters of rainfall for the entire year. So this is actually a good thing that we're getting this much rainfall, especially considering that there's an El Nino being predicted for the peak of the hurricane season, when we normally get most of our rainfall. Although it's a good thing to have during the peak of the hurricane season, which means less storms, it might also mean less rainfall, which can prolong the drought that we're still undergoing at this time. So even although we've been getting some rainfall, we're still in a drought. Alright, so that's it for the forecast across Jamaica. Let's talk some more about the weather across the Caribbean. So as stated, we can see some amount of patches of low-level clouds moving from east to west across the portion of the northern Windward Islands and the Leeward Islands, bringing some amount of overcast skies and isolated showers to those areas. We can see some clouds right there coming into sections of Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, Belize. We can also see some clouds across portions of the Cayman Islands, portions of central and eastern Cuba, the southern Bahamas, and the Turks and Caicos right there associated with that cold front. Taking a look at the Doppler radar images, we can see if this map actually loads up. Doesn't seem like it wants to load up today at all. Let's take a look at the Doppler radar images of Barbados. So we can see a better view of the rainfall that's being received across portions of the Leeward and Windward Islands right there. We can see the light rain in blue, the greens represent moderate rainfall, and the yellows represent stronger rainfall. So we can see that Barbados is getting in on some amount of rainfall at this time as well as earlier today. Sections of St. Lucia, St. Vincent getting in on some of that rainfall as well. Martinique, Dominica, Guadeloupe got some rainfall today and still getting some amount of rainfall tonight as well. If we actually take a look at the wider view of Doppler radar images, we can also see that we have some amount of rainfall right there across portions of the Leeward Islands, even although we didn't get to see it on the previous map. So maybe Antigua, Barbuda, St. Bart's, and Anguilla getting in on some of that isolated shower as well. We can also see some amount of rainfall coming off of the western coast of Puerto Rico right there. Skipping southward, we can see some greens right there across portions of French Guiana, some greens right there across sections of Colombia that represent rainfall. And just like what we saw in the satellite images, we can see some amount of isolated showers right there across portions of Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras associated with the trough that was induced by that cold front. Taking a look at the temperature forecast for tomorrow, we can see some above normal temperatures being predicted for the Gulf of Mexico and the northwestern coast of Cuba, portion of the southern United States, as well as portions of Mexico. We can also see some above normal temperatures across portions of Hispaniola and the Turks and Caicos Islands, but the below normal temperatures seem to be right there across portions of Central America, so Belize, portions of Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, portion of the northern coast of Venezuela as well as the ABC Islands, Trinidad and Tobago, portion of Guyana, French Guiana, and Suriname right there. You can also see some below normal temperatures right there across portions of the Windward Islands as well. So it seems like Jamaica and Puerto Rico seem to be the only islands, as well as some of the islands of the Leeward Islands right there to the east of Puerto Rico, that will be getting average temperatures for tomorrow. Keeping in mind that both maps are showing 1 p.m. on Wednesday, and we know that when we have consensus on both the Euro and the GFS models, the chances of it actually happening are much higher. Moving along to 2 p.m. on Wednesday, according to the Saharan dust forecast, we can see that majority of the Caribbean is in the clear right now. Majority of the dust associated with the Sahara Desert is right there across portion of the southern main development region, as well as the landmass of Africa. Let's take a look at the wave forecast for tomorrow. We know that the blues represent 1.5 meter wave heights or less, but the purples represent 2 meter wave heights or more, 2 to 3 meter wave heights, even in the reds right there. And we can see this, the highest wave height to the east of the Caribbean, where we have that strong easterly flow, not to mention to the east and northeast of the Bahamas right there, especially to the south, the far south of Jamaica, so to the north of Panama and Colombia right there, getting in on some amount of high wave heights, and that's due to the winds that we'll be receiving tomorrow. Taking a look at the wind forecast, we know that the greens represent those 10 to 20 knot winds, but the yellows represent 25 or more wind speeds. And we can see the strongest winds right there to the north of Panama, to the south of Jamaica, to the north of Colombia, not to mention right there coming in from the northeast across portions of Bermuda and areas east of there to the far east of the Bahamas right there. You can also see some strong easterly winds right there across portions of the eastern Caribbean. We can even see some yellows in there on the GFS model. You know that when we have consensus like this, chances of it actually happening are much higher. Taking a look at the precipitation forecast for tomorrow, this map is showing all the rainfall that's expected from now up until 10 p.m. on Wednesday. So if it's not already falling, it's gonna be falling over the next 24 hours. So we have some more rainfall in store for portions of eastern Puerto Rico, getting in on even an inch of rainfall. Portions of Guadeloupe and those very islands that we just spoke about getting rainfall as seen by the Doppler on the Doppler radar image from Barbados. So sections of Dominica, sections of Montserrat. We can also expect some rainfall across portions of Martinique, St. Lucia right there. And we might even have some isolated flash flooding taking place. We can expect less than an inch of rainfall across portions of the central and eastern section of Cuba, the Cayman Islands. Scrolling down to the south, we can see up to an inch of rainfall across portions of the Costa Rica area as well as Panama, not to mention Colombia, the eastern sections or the far eastern sections of Venezuela, and the northern sections of Guyana right there. And we know that when we have consensus on both maps like this, the chances of it actually happening are much higher. Moving along to the western section of the basin, we can see a lot of reds right there across portions of Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras. So they are still getting some amount of rainfall by the leftover clouds associated with that cold front that they've been affected with or affected by for the past couple of days. And more than likely it's a trough that it has induced across portions of the western Caribbean. So they still have some amount of rainfall to get, and considering that we're seeing reds that represent up to an inch or more for rainfall, so there is a chance that we might even see some isolated flash flooding taking place in those spots. So those people need to take the necessary precautions so that they're not that drastically affected. Alright, so that's it for today. Thanks for watching.